Alright, here's the video today. I put out a tweet, posted here, asking what's a piece of gaming or Splatoon terminology you didn't know when you started playing that you wish had been explained to you earlier. A lot of people, as has been pointed out, missed the word terminology and just asked about things in general that they wanted to know about the game. But there were a bunch of people who came up with terms that we use in gaming culture and also in Splatoon culture, because sometimes, you hear a term, you don't know if it's Splatoon specific or if it's used someplace else, so we just collected all of those. I did not collect any of the ones that were not related to Splatoon, so for example, there were a bunch of fighting game terms. I don't know what a meaty is either. I don't know what fuzzy guard is. I haven't played a fighting game that isn't a platform fighter, so I don't know about those ones, but the ones that actually apply to Splatoon, that might apply just to Splatoon or might apply to all other games, I am going to try and cover here, and this is as complete a list as I could figure from the responses that I got to that, and it goes for a little while here. So, we're going to get started here real quick. Feeding. Feeding is a term that means running in and dying. This is typically something that's done for little to no effect, something that is relatively pointless, something that is not especially useful to the team, something that is to be avoided by, at least most weapons. Maybe the Tetras have an argument for maybe going in and feeding a little bit, but this term comes originally, I believe, from MOBA games like Dota or League of Legends. Possibly from earlier, but I know it has to originate from a game in which you getting killed leads to the opponent becoming stronger. Like in League of Legends, if you kill an opponent, you get extra gold that you can use to power up your character from doing that. So every time you get killed, you're actually making the other team more powerful than they were before. That meaning is not retained in Splatoon, but that's why you're feeding them specifically. You're making them stronger by throwing yourself in. In Splatoon, you give up positional advantages, and that's still, something that they can probably snowball off in the short term, but it's not quite as bad as it is in, say, a MOBA, but the term is still retained because, the definition of it, at least, if not the etymology of it, still makes sense. And is something to talk about in this game. Very similar term is inting, which is just short for intentional feeding. If you're inting, the original way to use the term is this is someone who's griefing the team. This is someone who is deliberately trying to lose the game, which is something you could do in like a MOBA to make your teammates very upset at you and waste a lot of people's time. That term gets used sarcastically a lot to refer to a player who you disagree with their decision making so much that, oh my god, that dude's inting. What is he doing? Like, you can't think of a justification for why they're going in and dying like they are, except that they were doing it intentionally. Generally not used in a very positive way. That's not something that I tend to like to use in Splatoon for that reason. Feeding is enough. Okay, sharking. Sharking is a very Splatoon-specific tactic in the way that we use it. It is staying hidden in your own ink in squid form, waiting to ambush someone. So this is a very common tactic for roller players, for example, or brushes. They'll sit in a patch of ink that is a little bit out of the way, but near where an opponent is going to walk by in all likelihood, and you splat them as soon as they come by. Pushing refers to moving the enemy team out of the way to take more control of the map. The game revolves around a cycle of pushing and then retreating or waiting or stalling. When you're pushing, that's when you and your team are all trying to run at the enemy team and get them out of the way and move them out of the way so you can get the Rainmaker through, or push them away from the tower so that they can't stop you from riding it, or make a space for you to be able to run a power clam, or get them further and further back away from the splat zone. In the micro scale, that means you're attacking a player on the enemy team. or maybe a group of enemies, doesn't necessarily mean you're hard committing. It just means that you are putting enough pressure on them that they're likely to fight back. Diving is distinct from pushing in that you're not trying to push the enemy front lines back. You are trying to penetrate behind the enemy team. You're trying to like get in the middle of them. You're trying to go into enemy ink here. Diving is something you do with maybe like Tetradualies, where you can roll into enemy ink, get behind them. You can like get in the middle of them. In Overwatch, for example, there's a character named Winston who has an ability that allows them to gain a lot of HP. So I just realized I went through that whole explanation and I kept using the term HP. And this is a video about defining video gaming terms, and I never actually defined it. HP stands for hit points. Hit points is a very common video game mechanic for showing when a character is defeated. A character will start with a set number of hit points, and that's a number. And when they take a hit, when they get damaged by whatever, the hit points decrease. It takes away a certain number of them. So for example, a splatter shot does 36 damage per shot. And when you get hit by that, you go from having 100 hit points to having 100 minus 36 hit points. And then you go down further and further the more damage you take. And once you reach 0, then your character is splatted. And so that's really common for a variety of different game genres to use that sort of a system to show when a character is healthy versus when a character has been beaten. In Overwatch, for example, there's a character named Winston who has an ability that allows them to gain a lot of HP and jump really long distances, and they already have the ability to set up an energy shield around them. And so this character will literally jump into the middle of the enemy team, set up this energy shield, so you have to be right on top of them in their weapon's range to be able to do anything to them, and then they just take a whole bunch of damage. And it's a very disruptive thing to do. It's something where if you're able to stay alive in there like you can with, say, Winston, that the rest of your team can collapse around that and have pinch angles on things, and it's very difficult to deal with. In Splatoon, it's a lot more risky because you're going to have only 100 HP no matter what weapon you're grabbing. So when you're diving, that often means you're taking a pretty high risk and taking a really aggressive fight, and it's something you probably want like the element of surprise before you try and do. Okay, when we talk about rotating in the context of this game, we're talking about moving to different locations on the map. So let's pull up a map really quickly and talk about what this looks like. We're on Wahoo Rainmaker, and let's say that Rainmaker is currently here in mid, and it's trying to push in this direction. And just to make things easier on us, let's just assume that the first checkpoint is already down. So we're not looking for one of these. We're trying to look for this. From mid here, the Rainmaker could go for this, or they could go for this, or some slight variation on one of those two paths. And the defense needs to recognize which of those sides the Rainmaker is committing to. If the Rainmaker moves over to this position, they need to make sure that they have a defense to prevent them from going in this direction. But if the Rainmaker goes to here, then they need to put defense over on this position. So if the Rainmaker starts to head this way, then realizes they don't like that idea and turns around and comes back this way, the defense has to rotate from here to here to be able to stop the Rainmaker. So it's a macro scale movement that refers to your ability to get the team to the place on the map that they can actually be valuable in. Okay. Strafing and sub-strafing. I have an entire video on this, and yes, it's from Splatoon 2, but it goes into this topic very thoroughly, and I don't think there's really anything new that I need to add to it, so I'm just going to link to that video, and you can go and watch it from there. Kiting. I explained this pretty thoroughly in the How to Get Out of A Rank video, and I'm going to link to that as well. But I also want to draw a picture here to explain this concept, because this is really important, and a lot of people were demonstrating in the replies on Twitter that they don't necessarily understand what this is exactly. So I'm just not even going to use the map. I'm just going to scribble over the top of it. Like, this is not, illustrating map geometry. This is just, imagine that we're on like an empty 2D plane here. when I, make this diagram. So we got 2 players here. This player has a longer ranged weapon and this player has a shorter ranged weapon, and that's what's shown by the arrows. So this player can already hit this player, whereas this player cannot currently hit this player. In this game, weapons that have to get close to you typically have faster kill times to compensate. So we can anticipate that if this player is able to get this close to the other player, now they have an advantage. Now they're probably going to win that fight because they're doing damage faster. So the advantage that the longer ranged weapon has on the shorter ranged weapon across an open playing field, because again, we're not using elevation change or cover or anything to factor into this, the advantage that they have is contingent on them remaining in this kind of state where they can hit this player and this player can't hit them back. If this player just stands still and keeps firing at this player, then what this player has to do to win is to push this far forward and then start hitting shots. If, however, while this player is pushing forward, so we'll mark down how far they had to move. This player had to move this far before they were in range. If, however, we make it so that as this player is shooting, they're walking backwards and they end up here, this player doesn't just have to go this far to be in range. They have to go all the way over to here. They have to move this far before they're in a position where their weapon hits. And it's this interval right here, this much space, that you add to the short-ranged weapon's gap close. That is the advantage of kiting. Kiting is just walking backwards and firing back at the opponent as they move toward you. And you do that because the amount of time it takes to cross this gap is extra time that you have as the longer ranged weapon to keep hitting shots on the short ranged weapon while they're trying to get into position to be able to attack you. It's time that you get to aim your shots and hit your shots, but it's time where they are just having to keep moving. They don't get anything out of that time interval. All they're able to do is just keep running forward at you. So, under the assumption that this player is going to try and rush you, it's always advantageous as the long-ranged weapon to back up. And if you're going to try and play it safe, you always want to be kind of backing up and kiting. Now, if there's a possibility that this player just turns and runs, then you might want to stop kiting and actually try to run a little bit further forward to keep engaging on them. But under the assumption that they're going to keep running at you, this is the optimal way to play that engagement across open ground when there's no cover or elevation change or anything like that. So kiting is a really important aspect of playing a longer ranged weapon, knowing when it's your job to kite the enemy player and when it's your job to try and rush them down. That's kiting. Okay. Flanking. I'm surprised that this is a term that's as little known, because this is just an aspect of military strategy in general, right? Like, in history classes, like they talk about flanking when they talk about like Roman warfare. Flanking is attacking the side of an opposing formation. The flank, when you talk about like meat, is the side of the animal, like a flank steak or something. So flanking is attacking them in the side. The idea being that with one, part of your team attacking the front of them and someone else attacking the side, the enemy team has to deal with opponents in 2 different directions and has to split their forces or something to deal with that, whereas you and your team are only attacking one body of the opposing side. Camping. In gaming terms, this is sitting on one part of the map and preventing the opposing side from taking it by threatening to ambush them or zone them away. Camping is something that's often complained about in like online games. If, for example, there's some area on the map that's really useful as an ambush point, someone might just sit there and like not do anything else in the game, and it feels like very unengaging that there's just someone waiting to ambush you and you get jumped and you never see it coming. So it's a lot less of an idea in Splatoon in that people don't have a lot of HP, and you can definitely shark someone by hiding, but just sitting on one position and that position just being impossible to push someone off of, that's not really the case when you've got stuff like missiles, booyah bomb, tri-strike in the game. You're always going to get something chucked at you if you're in a place that's too annoying. So it's not that common to see. But you'll also see people refer to camping as pitching a tent on that spot, which is just a direct reference to the word camping. The one major exception here, and the reason that camping is on this list, is that when someone has a super jump point and you sit and wait for that player to land before splatting them immediately, you call that camping their jump. So you can camp a jump, you can camp an inkjet jump point, you can camp a zipcaster return point, anything like that. We call that camping that spot, and for very similar reasons. But in terms of like a macro scale strategy, that's not really something you see. You really only see it used when it's referring to stopping someone from being able to jump in. Baiting. This is literally making yourself like fishing bait or something. This is tricking the opponent into engaging on you when that actually plays into you or your team's hand. So if you run out there and go, hey, look at me, I am so alone and isolated, I am afraid of you, and then you run around a corner, and around that corner you have a roller waiting in ambush, that's a bait. You've baited the opponents into your trap. Throwing in gaming sense tends to refer to losing a game on purpose, as in throwing a match. This is something that people have talked about since very early sports, athletics, throwing a match maybe for money or something because someone bribed you to. Now, typically in gaming, this is very similar to Inting, which we talked about earlier, where a lot of the time people will refer to something as throwing when the person wasn't actually intentionally trying to lose. It's just someone who's frustrated that their team made a bad decision and is blaming on them for throwing the game. And I find it to be generally pretty negative when used in that context. Stream sniping is the idea of readying up at the same time as somebody that you're watching on a stream. Or it doesn't necessarily need to be stream. It could be just a friend that you're trying to get into a random online match-made lobby with. So that you end up in the same online randomly match-made game. So you're trying to get into a game that you shouldn't be able to choose who you play with in that game mode, but you're trying to accomplish that just by pure chance by readying up at the same time. Splatdashing is a pretty old term that I don't see used very often, but this refers to a particular movement tactic, which I will switch over to the game really quickly to show off. Most effective when used by shooter players. So Splatdashing is putting a single dot of ink at your feet, and just enough for you to swim, and then putting another dot. And this is the fastest way to start moving out of enemy ink and getting to safety. It's a really important tactic for firefights, because a lot of the time when you start a fight, your feet are going to get painted pretty quickly because someone else is shooting at you. And so this is a way that you can move pretty quickly and get a quick burst of acceleration that's enough to throw their aim off or to get you behind a piece of cover without having to spend the amount of time that you need to swim at optimal, long distance speed, which requires you actually painting a line for yourself. So to be clear, the fastest way to move is to paint a line and swim in it, because you spend the least time painting for the most time swimming. But in some cases, you don't have the time to be safe and paint an entire line for yourself. And so then you just drop a little drop of paint on the ground, and you move around as quickly as you can by doing this. And this quicker acceleration but slower long-term movement is called Splatdashing. It's a reference, I believe, to wave dashing from the Melee community. There's a lot of terminology and ideas that we kind of carried over from them. And so we wanted an equivalent to wave dashing, and so we called it Splatdashing, and that's kind of where that comes from. It's another reason that, like, Squid Boards is titled the way that it is, because it was just off the back of Smash Boards. Okay, Squidbagging. I have a video on Squidbagging, which explains it to some degree. Squidbagging is derived from the term teabagging, which would not be especially appropriate to explain here. But teabagging is a pretty gross, like, dominance display that you see in especially a bunch of older shooters. And Squidbagging is meant to emulate that. So by default, like, Squidbagging, especially after you've, like, splatted someone, is understood to be disrespectful. But it's also just kind of funny to flop around as a squid. And I think some people arrive at it not knowing the origin of teabagging. And so it's taken on multiple different meanings. For example, squidbagging is often a way that people will initiate a squid party with an opposing team in, like, a turf war match or something, where they'll go right up to an opponent who would otherwise pose a danger to them, and instead of, going into combat mode and trying to shoot at them and stuff, they'll just squidbag in front of them as a display that they come in peace. So it's a pretty nuanced communication in this game that is really context dependent. Ledge canceling, or canceling in general, because these are terms that, while specific to Splatoon, that aspect of it is relevant to other areas of gaming. When you're canceling something in a game, typically what that means is that there's some animation that would normally play during that time that's just wasted time that takes agency away from the player. And canceling means that you're going to remove those extra frames of animation so that you can act sooner, and it speeds up your gameplay. Ledge canceling in particular is something that I have made videos about, but I'll demonstrate here really quickly since I happen to have this open. Ledge canceling is when you're trying to climb up a wall, and instead of wanting to, like, fly all the way up over the top and then land back down before you can swim in your ink again, you release the ZL button partway up the wall, right about here, so that instead of your momentum carrying you all the way up over the top like this, your momentum carries you just to the very lip of the ledge, and you can go back into squid form and jump into the ink faster than if you went all the way up and over. Because remember, being up in the air is slower in this game than being in your ink and swimming. So minimizing air time as you come up over the top speeds things up so that you get up over the ledge faster than you normally would. So that's ledge canceling. And you can see that it's canceling in general in that it's making it take less time to get up over the ledge because you're canceling that extra bit of animation that your character would normally have done if you were to go up in a normal way. All right, peeking. Peeking is exactly what it sounds like in, like, peekaboo. Like, you're just looking around a wall. Someone's right here, and I'm just peeking out from behind it. In game, that also refers to, with your shots, peeking around the wall and then firing at that angle if there's somebody there. So if I'm going to peek this angle here, that means I think that there's someone around the corner, and I'm just going to do, like, one of these. And this moves us into our next explanation, which is right side peek advantage. In Splatoon, all of the Inklings are right-handed, with the exception of people who have just done a dualies dodge roll. You can see that, like, when I fire the weapon, I hold the weapon on the right-hand side of my body. And so I actually can hit around this wall sooner from the right side, with more of my body being around this ledge. It's right about here. Half of my body is protected here. Then I can, if I'm trying to do that from the left side. You can see that in order to get shots around, I need to really have my entire body exposed here. So you have a slight advantage if you're peeking around the right-hand side with your weapon than if you're peeking around the left-hand side, and that should inform your positioning somewhat. Smurfing. Smurfing has a pretty funny story to it, actually. It goes back to, I believe it was StarCraft? I'll correct myself there if I'm wrong. But some old pros loved to go on a server with the names Papa Smurf and Smurfette, if I remember correctly. And nobody knew who they were because they used those names. If they had used the names that they used on their main accounts, then everyone would realize, oh, these are some of the best players on Earth. But since they didn't know who it was, they were getting absolutely blown up by this person they'd never heard of. Like, who the heck is Papa Smurf? Holy crap, they destroyed me. And so playing as a stronger player on a lower level account is known as smurfing. So for example, a Smurf account in Splatoon might be an X-rank player who gets a second account, pays for another instance of Nintendo Online or whatever, so that they can play in C rank and be a stronger player in a lower rank of play. This does require in Splatoon getting, I believe, at least another Nintendo Online subscription. So it's not a free thing you can just do, but it does still happen to some degree. I've done it for content before, for example. The how to get out of ranked videos would not have been possible without the practice of smurfing. And it is controversial in that it puts higher level players up against people who are not ready to fight them yet. And that's fun for the higher level player because they get to, absolutely stomp on some people. But the people getting stomped on don't really feel good about that. And sometimes it's something that can cause them to feel less good about playing the game. So there's definitely a question of ethics for whether someone should go about this. Meta or metagame, this is also a very poorly understood term, which is scary because it's so common and so important. So to start with, meta as a prefix, it is a prefix on the beginning of a word, is a term that in Greek just means after or past. So like you can actually refer to something's physical position by just saying it's meta something. So it's one step past it. But in English, this has come to be a prefix that means that you're thinking more beyond in a way that transcends what it is that comes after. So the game, we'll go to the term metagame now. The game, understanding the game just means what the mechanics of the game are. Like, when I press ZR, what happens? When I press ZL, what happens? How much range does this weapon have? Those are aspects of the game. The metagame is analyzing the way that the game is designed to figure out what strategies are optimal. So going beyond the game means saying, okay, this weapon has more range than this weapon, but they have the same time to kill and they paint the same amount, so the longer ranged weapon is going to get picked more often than the shorter ranged weapon. That is a very simplified aspect of doing an analysis of the metagame. Because of the way that the game is designed, that therefore causes player behavior to shift in this way. So the metagame is an understanding of player behavior, of competitive player behavior. And in theory, perfectly logical, reasonable players would make it so that the metagame is just the best way to play the game. And that's often how it's understood to be, because you throw a whole bunch of players at the game, all of which with different approaches and different ideas and understandings of it, and they're probably going to get pretty close to understanding what the best strategies are. And the metagame is generally going to reflect that at a top level of tournament play. But sometimes things elude players for a while, and the metagame has a major shift, not because the game itself changed, but because the players figured something out that's new about it, that upends an old strategy and prioritizes a new strategy. And so it's a pretty complex interplay of game mechanics and player strategy that leads to the metagame, which you could probably best describe as the set of strategies that you're most likely to see at a very high level of tournament play with human players. You'll often see people say that META stands for most efficient or effective tactic available, META. This is actually a backronym. That is an acronym that arose after the original word already existed and meant something else. So that is not where the word comes from at all. It comes from that Greek prefix, and it's been used in all sorts of other words, like metaphysics. It makes no sense to talk about metaphysics as a tactic for anything, unless we're gods. I don't know. It means something outside of that context, but with metagame, that's something that can be kind of helpful to think about to get you pretty close to what the word means. Watch your six is a term that originates actually from the military. There's a really common system of giving directions in two-dimensional space where you just refer to what's around you as a clock. So what's straight ahead is the top of the clock, so 12 o'clock. What's behind you is your 6 o'clock. And then what's to your right is your 3 o'clock. What's to your left is your 9 o'clock. I know that I look like I'm pointing in opposite directions. That's because I'm mirrored on the recording. So watch your 6 means there's someone behind you. Watch your back. And that's where that derives from. Callouts, I have a couple of videos explaining callouts in great detail, and also I curate the callouts list for Splatoon 3. I'm the one who created all of the callouts on the new maps that are most widely distributed, and so I'll have linked to all of that in the description, both the explanation of what callouts are and the link to the formal callouts. So if you're trying to learn map callouts here, just go and look at those links. Uptime and downtime are a concept that gets referred to a lot, and specifically in talking about weapons. Uptime in general means the amount of time that something is active, while downtime is the amount of time something is inactive. Or we might also say on cooldown, which is a more video gamey term. So when we're talking about a weapon in terms of its play style, if it has a lot of downtime, that means that, say, its fire rate is low or it runs out of ink really quickly. There's a lot of time that it has to spend doing nothing in order to operate. So an example of this would be, say, the range blaster. It's a pretty ink-hungry weapon, and it's also a weapon that has a very slow fire rate. So there are a lot of times in the game where the range blaster will not be able to do stuff just because it's either in between shots or it's out of ink. You talk about downtime a lot with like the dually squelchers as well, because they run themselves out of ink pretty quickly in normal play. Jump tech is really expensive on your ink tank, and that's the way that they typically want to fight. And it's already a fairly ink-hungry weapon as it is, so you end up running yourself out of ink pretty quickly and having to spend a lot of time just sitting and recollecting ink in the middle of the match. And so you could also talk about this with regard to specials. So for example, a big bubbler, you could say, has a pretty significant amount of uptime unless it gets shredded. You could talk about the crab tank having potentially like the most uptime out of any special in top level play. It's probably going to last the entire like 9 seconds out on the map, which is a long time. Maybe Tacticooler, I guess you could say, would have more uptime than that. But what the crab tank is doing with its uptime is more significant. So, you know, it's basically just how long is it active compared to how often it's inactive. How long is it doing something and how long is it not doing something. AoE stands for Area of Effect. This is damage that's not going to hit an individual target, but is going to target an entire area of space. So think about a blaster for a second. When you fire a blaster, there's an entire big sphere at the end of that blaster shot that's being hit by the shot. You can hit multiple players at the same time with a blaster. You're not going to hit multiple players at the same time with a splatter shot. A splatter shot doesn't have AoE damage. A blaster does. If you're anywhere in that sphere, in that area that the blaster shot explodes, you're going to get hit, regardless of whether it's already hitting someone. So the opposite of this would be single target damage. RNG stands for random number and then either generator or generation, depending on what context you're talking about it in. This is the system in the video game that decides when a random event is going to occur. Because true randomness is like a very weird, difficult mathematical concept to wrap your head around, and like programming for it is a bizarre concept. It's like you're waiting for some like quantum event to occur or something. We simulate randomness in video games. We make it so that there's a way of making something functionally random, of making it so that a human player interacting with this video game cannot predict what is going to happen when, say, they press a button. So, for example, the 52 gal is a weapon that you would say has pretty bad aim RNG. And when we say that, what we mean is that when you pull the trigger, you're not completely sure that that shot is going to fire in the same place every time. You can see that some of these shots are going into different places, even though I'm not aiming any differently. And that's because of RNG. It is randomly decided that every so often a shot will fire, instead of at this center circle, at some randomly chosen place within the four corners on the screen here. And so if you get good RNG, that means that you got lucky and the game gave you the outcome that you wanted. And if you get bad RNG, it's the opposite. You hear this talked about a lot in speedrunning as well. For example, a lot of the time in boss fights, a boss enemy's attacks won't be predictable because then it would be too easy. They'll be decided by random number generation. And so when you get good RNG as a speedrunner, the boss did the attack that lets you beat them faster. And when you get bad RNG, the boss did the attack that takes a long time and doesn't give you an opportunity to fight back. A lot of the time in speedruns, you will see random number generation manipulation, RNG manipulation, or RNG manips for short. And when they're doing those, what they're figuring out, sometimes you can do this with a tool-assisted software so that you're putting in the inputs frame by frame, because sometimes randomness is generated based on what frame you're on, and so if you do a frame perfect input, you'll get the same result every time. Sometimes there are other aspects in the game that random number generation is tied to. For example, in Fire Emblem, when you've got a unit and you're trying to figure out what path you want to make them take, putting in a certain kind of combination of directions while you're aiming their cursor before you press the A button and make them move would actually cycle through the game's random number generation values. It would make it so that you pick a different number. And at a certain point, there was a way to tell, okay, after I've done it this many times or in this number of directions, I don't remember exactly how it worked, you could know for sure that a certain thing was going to happen when they had their next combat, because that particular cycle of random number generation would cause you to get the outcome you wanted. Quick climbing. Quick climbing is mashing the B button while climbing a wall to climb up faster. So it is the difference between doing this, where I climb it normally, and doing this, where I'm mashing the B button to get up faster. So slow climbing, quick climbing. You can see there's a bit of a difference there, and that difference definitely matters in a game as fast as this. Main, sub, and special refer to the three different pieces of a weapon's kit. So I was using the 52 gal right now. The main weapon is the 52 gal, the sub weapon is the splash wall, the special is the killer whale. Now, this gets a little confusing because main and sub also get used to refer to gear abilities. So when we open up the gear menu, right now this piece of gear has a main of Ninja Squid and three subs of respectively quick respawn, swim speed, and special saver. So it is definitely not great terminology that we decided to mix those terms, but here we are. And so utility subs, this does not refer to sub weapons. This refers to sub abilities. There are certain sub abilities in the game, abilities that you can just throw like 1 or 2 subs of onto a piece of gear that give you a disproportionate amount of benefit. For example, I don't think there's a single kit in the game that shouldn't be running at least 1 sub of quick super jump. It just gives you too much time save on jumping out of a bad situation to not be worth it. The difference between, surviving an encounter and not is often made purely by that sub of quick super jump. And so for that being that little of a gear investment and getting you that much value, it's typically worth it to run that. So utility subs, you tend to have like 1 or 2 subs of quick super jump, maybe like a sub of special saver, especially on aggressive weapons, 1 or 2 subs of ink resistance. Those tend to be very high value in very small quantities. And so a lot of different builds, if they have extra space, are going to make some room for those subs, which are referred to as utility subs. Comp. Sometimes people say comp referring to competitive play, as a, casual versus competitive play, casual or comp. But what it more often refers to in the competitive space is weapon composition. That is the weapons players choose and how they synergize with one another. So when I'm talking about a weapon comp as an analyst, I'm talking about like they're running, Splash, Neo Splash, Machine, and Stamper. That's a weapon comp. Coordination or special coordination. Coordination in general refers to doing things with your team in a way so that the 2 teammates are helping each other rather than doing 2 separate jobs. So a coordinated engagement means that you've got like 2 players fighting the same enemy player and they're attacking that enemy player at the same time to overwhelm them. Whereas an uncoordinated fight would be you're taking 2 different fights at different places on the map at the same time. Special coordination is making sure that your specials are being used in a way that help each other. So to be coordinated, you don't want to use all of your specials at the same time, but you want to maybe use 2 to get the fight going, and then once the enemy team is committed, you use a 3rd one to accelerate that fight and win it, and maybe you use the 4th if you need to, or you save the 4th for being able to continue your momentum moving forward. And that's generally a pretty good rule of thumb. Generally, coordination is going to be same time, same target when we're talking about fights, but you could make a coordinated push by having someone engage one side of the enemy team while the other side of your team engages somebody else, and have that first player be a distraction. That's still a coordinated play, so there are some exceptions there. X-Rank divisions. So when people talk about Takoroka division or Tentatek division, they're talking about the region. So Takoroka is Japan, New Zealand, Australia, and Asia, whereas T-Tech is NA and EU and various other regions that play the game on that hemisphere. X-Rank divisions are chosen at the beginning of the X-Rank season, like the first time that you open up X-Rank during that season, and you can't change them once you pick them. So there's question of like, should I be playing on the North American server where I'll have better ping, better connection, or should I be playing on the Takoroka server where you'll find the absolute top level best players in the world? Generally, the answer to that question is if you're under, say, 2500, 2600 X power, just stay on the NA servers. But if you have to go higher up than that, you might need to do that just to be able to get matches, because you'll have such a hard time matchmaking on the NA servers. Glico. Glico refers to I have an entire video on this too, but Glico 2 specifically, people will often just refer to it as Glico for short, is the matchmaking or ranking system, really, that Splatoon uses in order to pair people up in matches against like skill players. It's a version of the ELO system that was designed by a guy named Glickman, hence Glicko. It's ELO, but Glickmanified. Okay. Some general gaming terminology here. Cracked means highly skilled at the game, especially mechanically. Sweat is a term that I don't like very much because I don't think it's very useful nor very healthy mentality-wise. But someone who's sweating is someone who is tryharding. This is especially used to refer to people who are playing to win very competitively in a game where other people might not be caring about the game as much. This is used when someone's trying to play casually and there's someone in their lobby who they perceive to be much, much better than them, or who's trying way, way harder than they are, and they're having less fun because of it. This is something that I tend not to like because it tends to lead to people like making excuses for, oh, I'm just playing more casually, man. Like I'm not trying to really win. But clearly they're upset about not winning because otherwise why would they be complaining about someone who's doing better than them? It's a pretty negative mindset to get into often when you hear people starting to refer to this. Tech is short for technique or techniques. It can also be usefully understood to refer to technology, although a technique is more... technique is the origin of it. Technology is just another way to understand it. But this is some tactic that you figured out in game that you're going to use, as a tool in your toolbox to try and win. So, for example, jump tech is a technique that you would use with the dually squelchers, and I've got a video on that. This video is based on Splatoon 2, but it does explain jump tech in detail in a way that's still completely applicable to Splatoon 3. So if that's something you don't know about and you play dually squelchers, that'd be a good video to check out. Scrim, short for scrimmage, which is a competitive game played between teams for practice, not as a part of a formal tournament. While everyone's trying their hardest in a scrim and they're trying to play to, do their best and win, this is more with a focus on learning than it is with a focus on this is the match that determines who's the best. So, for example, scrims might not mean quite as much as a tournament match because someone might be trying out a new weapon or learning a new weapon to play with the team in a scrimmage. So they are going to be trying their best on that weapon, but it might be with a tactic that they're not quite fully ready to use in the tournaments yet, and they're playing scrimmages to get themselves ready on that tactic for when they actually have to play it in a tournament. But scrimmages are pretty serious. If someone's not taking it seriously, they're not doing it right. And it's something that teams will do to learn, and you want to facilitate an environment around you of teams that are willing to scrim you, that are near your level or slightly above your level, so that you can get the best practice you can. These terms all here that I've got highlighted, I have a video on those, and it is the most popular video on my channel. These are all weapon roles, and I explain those in great detail in that video, which I will link in the description. Tournament structure. I also have a video on this. LUTI Divisions. I also have an explanation of this, so I'll link to that. Okay, capping zone. Capping is short for capturing. That is painting to the point where your team is now scoring. This is different from neutralizing the zone, which is painting it enough that neither team is scoring, and you're in that limbo area. Spacing or zoning is putting out threatening damage not to hard commit and try and splat someone, but to force them to move out of an area you're shooting at. So, for example, if you've got like a rapid blaster and you fire a shot at an area, you may hit someone and then they run away, and it might not be safe for you to chase that player because you're a longer ranged weapon with a pretty slow fire rate. But you have at least kept the player out of that area. You've controlled your zone. You've spaced them out. You've taken control of the space, the zone that is that spot, and you've moved them out of it. I explain this more in the How to Get Out of A rank video, which I already linked for the explanation on kiting. A VOD review is watching a replay of a match to study and learn from it. This could be something you do to your own matches. This could be something you do to a match of a higher level player so that you can understand what they're doing differently. This is something I do all the time to help other players understand what it is that they can, learn, and what they've been doing wrong, what they should be setting as their goals for future matches. The difference between a team and a project is that a team is a longer term commitment, something you expect to stay together permanently until further notice. Whereas a project is a shorter term commitment. Not shooter, shorter. Has a particular goal, which, once completed, leads to the disbanding of the team. So, for example, this is just a team that we're putting together to play in LUTI. But after LUTI, we're not planning on staying together. This is just like a way that we're going to be able to play together. Projects can sometimes lead to teams. Honestly, this is best understood in terms of relationships. Like, a steady team is like a long-term relationship. A project is like a fling. And so sometimes, you have a fling with someone and you're like, wait, I actually really like this person and I want to stay with them long term. Sometimes you're just like, nah, we're done. It's good. And you part on, happy terms, but not going to stay with each other for any longer than that. Found a way to make it dating advice, everybody. So gear ability abbreviations, there are a bunch of these. But a lot of the time, I think what confuses people is not that like if I were to say, okay, what does QR stand for? If they know I'm talking about gear abilities, they can just kind of work out in their heads, oh, that stands for quick respawn. Okay. And like quick QRSJ is short for quick respawn stealth jump, which is a really common set of gear builds for aggressive weapons, or maybe even a team strategy where you're just jumping a lot of people into the same spot, especially in Splatoon 1, when stealth jump actually just made you like pretty invisible, and it was very easy to just super jump people in over and over and over again, even if they got picks to land on the tower. And so you could keep splatting people on the tower, but they'd keep riding the tower and stay in control of it, and it was very annoying. You start putting the letters together and you figure out what they all stand for just by looking at the names of them. But if you don't know that you're looking at a gear abbreviation, that's when it might get confusing. So if you see a bunch of letters and you're not sure like what they stand for, just look at like the gear perks in the game and see if that's something that it could stand for. NS? What's NS? Oh wait, Ninja Squid. Neutral game. Neutral game is a game state where neither team or player in a 1v1 game has a significant advantage, and players are vying to try and gain an advantage so they can start scoring or accomplishing the objective, whatever that may be. So for example, in a fighting game, a lot of the time there's a combo system built in where once you get a hit, your character can, by nature of getting that hit, land several more hits in quick succession, and there's nothing the opponent can do about it. That's what a true combo is. A combination of moves that you can't do anything about. You get hit by the first move of that combo, you're getting hit by the rest of that combo. So the neutral game is the period where neither player is stuck in a combo, or neither player has a really big disadvantage that makes them likely to get stuck in a combo. It's where the players are feeling each other out, trying to see what is my opponent going to do, where can I attack? And once you attack, that's when the neutral game isn't happening anymore. So it originally comes from fighting games, which means that there are some generalizations that you can't necessarily carry over. FLC has been critical about the use of this term for describing Splatoon gameplay, but I still find it pretty useful to discuss that, like, when you're pushing, you're at advantage. When neither side is pushing, you're at a neutral state. And when the other team is pushing, you're at disadvantage. And to kind of think about it that way. And obviously, you know, we can think about this in terms of, like, there being inflection points where you can gain an advantage and start pushing yourself from your side of the map towards mid, but not have an advantage in the game yet because you haven't actually gained control of the objective or something. There's a lot more complexity you can add to that if you really want to. But this is a term that I find it very useful to describe a certain point of the game because it helps determine what your behavior should be when there's no advantage, but there's also no disadvantage. You shouldn't be, like, hard committing into an engagement just yet, but you also shouldn't just be, like, retreating away from the fight because you don't have to yet. You're kind of in the middle, you know, trying to collect information, trying to gain some kind of advantage, and then once you find one, you take it and you break the neutral game. Objective. Probably should have done this one a little bit earlier. Objective is the way you win the game. It's that simple. In Splat Zones, the way you win the game is by painting the square in the middle of the map and getting more points that way. In Turf War, the objective is painting the entire map and having more of it at the very end of the game. So it's specifically the end game paint that matters. In Tower Control, the objective is riding the tower. Like, it's very simply how you play the game. So when someone tells you to play the objective, they're telling you to get on the tower, pick up the Rainmaker, paint the zone, you know, whatever it takes to actually win you the game, as opposed to splatting players, which is something you might need to do, or pushing players out of the way to allow for other people to play the objective. Because only one person is going to be picking up the Rainmaker. It's everyone else's job to protect that player. So not everyone is the objective player in that game mode. One player is playing the objective. The rest of them are trying to do auxiliary goals that support the playing of the objective, which is as simple as swimming the big fish somewhere. Dodge roll is when the dualies dodge by holding down the ZR button, pressing the jump button in a direction. Advantages and disadvantages, I go over this substantially in the How to Get Out of S Plus video, so I will link to that video there. Woomy. This one's actually really funny that like, a lot of people don't know it anymore, because Woomy refers to a sound effect that was made by the female Inkling in Splatoon 1 when you pressed the Booyah input. It said Booyah, but what you heard was a sound that was kind of like, Woomy. I'll play it in editing so that you can hear what it sounded like and you can hear why it's called Woomy. And people still refer to this as, you know, this is a way of saying Booyah, or they'll also refer to Inklings sometimes as Woomies and Veemos. So little Woomies, or Veemo is what the Octolings would say in Splatoon 2. And so you're either a Woomy or a Veemo. But a lot of people don't know that because they don't make those noises anymore. That's not the sound that the characters make when you press down on the D-pad. So it's funny that that's kind of fallen out of common knowledge. Plus servers. These are Scrim servers. So remember Scrim being a practice game. They're Discord servers where players will go to find competitive matches to practice. Plus One was the original one. It was made by top players, and it's run by Sendu, who was a top European player. And it was really exclusive. You could only get in by the players voting you in. And that same mechanic has applied to the other servers as well. But people recognized that, you know, the people who were getting the best practice were all in Plus One, and we wanted to extend that opportunity to more players. And so Plus Two is created to allow for a slightly less exclusive place for more people to get practice, and Plus 3 is an extension of that as well. I've talked about this in several videos, and I'll link both of those, one of which I'm talking about the different skill levels as you get up to the being the very best in the world at Splatoon. You know, from casual to top player in the world, here are all of the ways that you measure that in the Splatoon community, and the Plus servers are a part of that. I also have a video where I discuss the Plus servers with someone who's in Plus 1, Plus 2, and Plus 3 all at the same time, which I will also link so you can get a better idea of how that works. GG is short for good game. I have a video on this, actually, and so I'll just link to that. And finally, a pickup team, or a pickup scrim, is a group of players that are not on a team together or even a project. They're just people who randomly happen to be looking for a scrim at that point in time, and they decide to play together just for the purposes of that one practice or that one event. So a pickup team will enter a tournament together with no intention of playing together after that, and a pickup scrim will play in a scrim, a practice scrim with each other with no intent of staying together after that. All right, that's our whole glossary. I am going to, because I'm sure I'll get asked this, I'll also put a link to this document in the description so you can go back and use it for reference if you'd like. But like I said, there are a bunch of these where I'm just answering this with a link in the description because it's going to be, it's already been a very long video and better to cut out some of that extra time explaining things that way. But let me know if you had any additional questions or if you think I got anything wrong or anything like that in the comments, and hope you found that helpful.